we actually have some breaking news here, and this is not good. What is this?
Yeah, some of this has been coming out here this morning, but officially there is now an arrest warrant out for Georgia defensive tackle Jalen Carter for 2 charges of reckless driving and racing. This coming from Seth Emerson, and I'm looking at a media press release right now from the Athens Clark County Police Department securing arrest warrants for Jalen Carter for reckless driving and racing. This is dates back to an incident that had happened in January that took the life of a teammate and a staffer in a crash. So I don't know. You can go and you can read the full story. I know it's been out, kind of making the rounds everywhere this morning. You can kind of get the details on the background, but officially an arrest warrant has been filed for Jalen Carter.
Yeah, this is where it sort of becomes the sort of awkward and artful sports betting side of things, where we sort of have to say there will be a portion of our audience now that upon hearing that will race to bet Will Anderson first defensive player drafted.
Yeah, Carter also originally scheduled to speak at the NFL Combine right now. I'm saying 10:30 Eastern time, so I'm going to guess that's not happening anymore, but maybe check it out.
Drew Dinsick rejoins us, kind enough to stick around for a second segment for both NBC Sports Bet the Edge podcast and the Deep Dive podcast, which he does with Andy Molitor. By the way, Andy Molitor should be mentioned, Drew. One of the funniest dudes around. Can we give him that title?
No arguments here.
Yeah. All right. There's that news.
Yeah.
What have you bet so far?
Will Anderson, first defensive player, is my biggest stake out there. I'm not even really joking, and this is a weird conversation to have, particularly in light of this, because this is a very sad and serious situation. Yeah. I don't think that realistically this impacts Jalen Carter's ability to, get drafted high, have a potentially a long and profitable NFL career. This is like misdemeanor charges. But this has been quietly talked about for about a month and a half. Readers of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution have heard of this going back at least a month ago, and I'm not sure why it took so long to really catch mainstream fire. The fact that it was sat on until 15 minutes before his media day appearance at the Combine feels a little bit like you want to be cynical about bettors who are running to the window to bet on this news. It feels a little cynical that the news dropped when it did for maximum impact to really to impact this kid. That said, he did something that pretty horrific. Drag racing a teammate who ultimately dies, and then lying to police, fleeing the scene and lying to police about it is not a great look. If that's if that's what transpired, and that's what's being put out there by law enforcement right now. So that impacts his draft status, or certainly in terms of being taken in the top 5, in my opinion. I think on the heels of this news, as well as the reports that Bryce Young is going to weigh in the 200-pound range at the Combine, during his appearance, I think that firms up the top 2 picks in the draft. You're probably going to see Houston and Chicago swap here. Houston takes Bryce Young 1, and Chicago takes Will Anderson 2. I don't think I'd put the probability of that, kind of happening above 50% now. I would put Bryce Young going 1, well above 50%, and Will Anderson being your first defensive player, I'd put that in the 80% range. Chicago and Houston, it's kind of funny and karmic, I guess, because Houston is in this position because Lovie Smith won that final game of the season with the 2-point conversion. And, the way that Houston treated their coaches the last 2 years, it feels like this is a little bit of the football gods, exacting some revenge and taking a pick away from them and giving it to Chicago. But I don't think Chicago is going to get fair offers for teams to move up to 1. The way that the winds are swirling right now, you have certainly quarterback picks going 2 and 4. If the order were to stay the way it is to Houston and Indy. Increasing likelihood that Seattle is in the mix to take a quarterback, particularly based on just the fact that they see themselves as unlikely to ever be at the top of the draft for the next 4 or 5 years. And they don't see Geno Smith as a long-term option. And so they're going to go get a guy to draft and develop. And then, Lions are in that exact mix as well. Lions and Seattle are interesting because they can go anywhere. They're teams that that feel like they are in contention in 2023, so they're going to try to get talent, but they also know that this is sort of their last bite at the apple to get elite quarterback talent without giving away tons of assets. And so 5 and 6 are absolutely in the mix for quarterbacks. We know 7 and 9 in with the Raiders and the Panthers don't have answers at quarterbacks at the moment. So what is that then? That's 6 teams out of the top 9 for 4 quarterbacks. I don't need you to do the math to tell you that that's not enough quarterbacks to go for all those teams. So that creates, I think, a pretty significant bidding war for the 3 seed. From what I hear, all of the teams outside of Houston, aside from some slight interest with the Colts, have kind of, they don't love Bryce Young enough to give the Bears, a Godfather offer to move up to number 1. So I think that makes the Arizona pick at number 3 sort of the target for everyone who wants to get ahead of the Colts to take their choice of the 2, 3, 4 at quarterback, and it could be anyone. Like I don't know that teams have even decided, but I would expect that Panthers, Raiders, and even the Lions and the Seahawks would consider flipping with the Cardinals at 3 in order to get their choice of guys. So at this moment, I would say you're looking at 4 out of the first 5 picks, probably quarterbacks, and then the 5th is Will Anderson to the Bears.
I think everything you're saying makes a lot of sense. And by the way, for those who are listening and asking, hey, why would Houston at 2 then? If they know Chicago's not going to draft a quarterback, why would they have to trade up? Well, they'd have to trade up to prevent the other teams from trading up, basically.
Right.
Are you convinced that pick for Houston would be Bryce Young?
I am. I think he's the lowest risk prospect of all of these guys.
Even with his height, he's the lowest risk.
Well, I mean, in terms of being able to play the position at a pro level, the height and the weight. If the height is unfixable.
That is correct.
Plenty of guys, though, at this point, there is enough of a track record between Russell Wilson and Drew Brees and even Kyler Murray to a degree. Like, there's enough of a track record of short quarterbacks succeeding in today's NFL that I don't think height scares anyone. And the weight question mark was an issue, and he's presumably going to answer that in a couple of days when he weighs in here. So, and also, weight has never scared me, and I don't think very many people about, NFL body, because he's a young guy like that. This is fixable. Like, you put a guy on a specific diet and training regimen, you're going to get him to play at 200 pounds and, even with the frame that Bryce Young has. So I don't think that weight ultimately is going to scare people away from ranking him as the best of these quarterbacks. He's got an elite arm. He's got elite kind of ability to read and just perform the job of quarterback at a pro level. So all the rest of the guys there have some question marks. Either, just in general, they have maybe higher ceilings. If you've heard people talk about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis as having, Josh Allen type of ceilings, and, Bryce Young maybe does not have that for whatever people see and think, because he's not as big, but he still has a huge arm. So I don't think it really scares people. And I think the fact that Indy is already on the record as, we like the kid from Alabama. Yeah. They've put up enough floaters there that Houston, once they kind of settle in on Bryce Young as our guy, I think that makes the most sense for them to flip-flop 2-1. And honestly, like, giving enough assets to move up to the 1, if you're outside of the top 4, I don't see it. It's too much to move up, and Bryce Young is not that elite of a prospect that I think anyone outside of the top 4 could pull it off. All that said, the Bears, man, they are in a very interesting situation. If I were the general manager of the, people have kind of spent a lot of time this week talking, or, last couple of weeks, should they trade Fields? Should they trade the 1? What do you do here? I mean, the answer is staring you in the face. Trade both. Like, this is absolutely the peak value you are going to have for Justin Fields if you want additional assets to rebuild your team. You need to rebuild your team. You are absolutely staring at the 1 pick for next year. All of these other teams that would realistically be in the 1 are taking quarterbacks this year. All of the teams that would realistically, be in the mix to take Caleb Williams are going to have guys that they are trying to develop. And so I think the Bears really should think about moving both.
Okay, but
getting maximum value.
But likelihood that they did both, would you put the percent?
Yeah,
Zero.
Relatively low. Yeah, relatively low.
Yeah, they're not doing that. but it makes sense.
I like the idea.
Yeah.
I really like the idea.
If you have a longer-term viewpoint on this, yeah, for sure.
Whether they start Fields or trade him, they're the most likely team picking first next year.
Drew, always a pleasure, man. We got to work out this Indian Wells thing with the podcast. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we got to work it out.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.